And that stamp gets included in the title work so that the county is protected down the road?
Well, for a certain length of time, I guess.
Well, and your protection is dependent upon the strength of your developer and any bonding that we require.
Exactly right. And see, that's something we need to consider, because right now the city does require a bond for 1 year after construction for any maintenance problems, and the county probably ought to consider that.
Well, infrastructure rarely shows up within the first 12 months.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. I mean, because I look at this as two different issues. One of those issues is what people choose to do on their own property that affects them. Government doesn't have any business on my property telling me and my family what roads we put in for us to use. If we put in substandard roads and we have potholes and we run our cars on our roads, that's our business. Before the county looks at taking over a road, the county should be looking to see whether or not we're going to adopt them, and those are the issues that we have in play here. The county taking on roads that don't match our road standards. So if I decide to, I know Clay Herman here, his parents divided their land amongst their kids, and they have roads that go to each one of their houses. And when they divided those up for each of their children, well, why should they have to go through any kind of planning to decide what kind of road they put into their houses? They are the ones that have to drive on them. They're the ones that have to
His spot is a typical example of what I've been getting into over here.
Right.
Mom and Dad splits off 2 acres over here and lets the son build a house.
Right.
And they use a common driveway or a...
The right-of-way issue is a good point. I'm not dealing with the right-of-way. The right-of-way is a valid point because no property should ever be landlocked.
Exactly.
That ought to be, I mean, that ought to be common law. I'm talking about standards of roads. Herman's property is an example. I have to go through Herman property to get to my property. I have 43 acres on the other side of Herman property. When I bought that road, I knew the condition of the road. I helped maintain that road. You know, I fill in the holes and we do all that. It's not a public road, nor do we want it to be a public road. And if we wanted it to be a public road, then we as landowners would get together and say, hey, let's deed this over to the county. And we'd say, hey, would you take over a road? We would expect the county to come and say, you bring it up to standards before you take it on. And it sounds like when y'all were talking about the roads that we took on in 2010 that was underwater, it looks like they were approved by the county to be brought in when they were under floodplain or some other catastrophic area.
A lot of this trouble was created by the developer.
Well,
because nobody's watching him.
But my point is, you can blame the developer all day long, but we're the one that decided to take it in. So I look at it and I say, if I've got Herman's a prime example because that's what they've done. If they've divided their property in, I don't think they need to come to a board of any type to ask, how do we have to do and what kind of roads do we have to put into our property and our houses? You know, if they're going to be doing a subdivision and they realize, hey, we may in the future want to divide this up and build condos or build whatever, that we may be having to take this to, you know, and sell it to the, or deed it over to the county that we've got certain road standards.
I think, I know where you're going, I understand that, but the problem I've seen is some of these developers went out here and bought a bunch of warehouse property and they're still doing it. They break this up into 1 to 2 acres.
Right.
Push an old trashy road in there and they tell the people, and I've already heard this from more than one, that's between you and the county here in the near future.
Right.
I didn't sell this, but this road now.
Right.
And we're not accepting any more dirt roads.
I know, but that goes back. We cannot, it is not government's job to protect people from taking care of their own business. If you've got a piece of property and you say, you know, Mr. Gates, you buy this property and in 2 years the government's going to come, they're going to take it over and they're going to pay it for you. If I buy that on face value, then I'm either a sucker or a fool, one of the two, because I have the ability to come down to the judge's office and say, hey, are y'all going to take over this road? Well, no, we're not going to take over the road. I need to go back to the developer and say, you're lying to me.
That's what I've been telling you.
And I don't think that we can protect.
You get them every day.
Government though,
every day.
my point is, government cannot protect people from being foolish and being sold a bill of goods from a contractor or a developer that's.
I don't think we're trying to do that.
Purchase government can
I just want to make sure that we're not
innocent
trying
people.
to protect everybody from everybody.
Right,
We're gonna
and
bring it
government
over.
can protect innocent people who buy a house in a subdivision, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. If he wants to have his own road, that's fine, but I live in a subdivision outside in the county, and I expect that my roads, which are dedicated to the county, be taken care of for all of the people who buy and build in that subdivision.
But that being said though, look inside the city limits. Then we would never find a building contractor, we would never find anybody inside the city of Hot Springs that had anything approved, ever have a problem with building code or anything else. Because it's inspected and everything else. That inspection process and those demands do not facilitate crooked people. You got a bad contractor. He's gonna, when the inspector comes, he's gonna show all the things that the inspector needs to see.
We're not going to building codes. That's not part of this deal. They're going to be building by state codes. And if they buy a house that's not built by state codes, you know, that's.
It's left to
And this is standards for a multi-building complex. I mean, it's not like if you've got 20 acres right now, you're going to have to go in, and if you give 2 acres to your daughter and 2 acres to your son, you're not going to have to go in and build this standard roadway. But now if you go in there and subdivide all that, and now you're going to throw in 50, 60, 80 homes, now you're going to have to bring that right-of-way up to
We
standards.
have a problem right now. Where's that subdivision that's going in out west there off of 70 that,
That's off Marion Anderson. One
off
I'm just
Marion,
talking about.
Marion Anderson.
Yeah.
And you got a one-lane road kind of that serves the community now, but he's gonna put in what, 100?
Oh, you're talking about South Rogers Road, where the apartment houses are. Yeah, I mean, how many people come unwound out there? They're gonna put in 312 apartments, ain't they, Jimmy? On a little narrow road that's
Those
built
are
for
Jimmy.
that kind of stuff.
Well, it's, a lot of people is real fit about it, but the city, for as I know, they couldn't, the city, I went to some of the meetings, the city says, we can't stop it, but we can approve it. But that's why you got it,
Well, I got
and
it.
it got approved.
I'd like to make a motion that we move forward pending the attorney reviewing an MOA, a memorandum of understanding, before we actually agree to the written word. But I make a motion that we move forward on this in the direction that you're moving. Second.
I don't think
so.
That's one thing I want to simplify on the property split. Within this 5-mile radius that they have a right to. I don't think they should tell anybody they can't sell part of 150 acres that they've been sitting on for their retirement and everything else in life. But it needs to be where it's not landlocking somebody, or it's got to be on public property. It's pretty simple, common sense stuff. If you choose to buy 47 acres over there and you don't have a right of way, then you kind of, you sucker in.
Stupid is, stupid does.
But it should be a dedicated right of way to your time.
I think it is state law, though, if you landlock somebody,
You have to give them the.
You gotta give them the easement, but you gotta hire an attorney, and you gotta type our court system to get that permission, which does not make any sense to me.
right?
Now, I'd like to make 3 or 4 points. Number one, George points out, the city has not always done a very good job watching the contractors build roads and put in infrastructure. I think they have gotten a lot better at it lately. There was a long period of time where it was pretty much ignored, and as a result, there is some pretty bad infrastructure within the city limits. The second thing I'd like to say is I think it's nigh time for the county to do something to try to correct these problems that have been occurring out in the county, which are costing us taxpayers because we're having to spend money on roads that should have been put in properly in the first place out of the county, weren't, and now it's just costing us and keeping our priorities from being what they should be. Third thing I think is important is, and that Justice Gates can appreciate this, if somebody upstream from where you are bought 40 acres, there's a naturally wooded area with a runoff of about 15% or so, and they were for some reason to slick it down with asphalt, if the runoff was in 5 different places, and when their development was finished with a large apartment complex or whatever else, you then had roofs and flat surface, the entire thing impervious to water, you then could have a point source going across your property that in times of storms might be 6 or 8 feet deep and 20 or 30 feet wide. That type of thing needs to be precluded. Even though they're doing on their own property what they want to do, it does in fact affect the downstream owner, particularly in terms of what the heck you do with stormwater. I've seen it done to where it really ruined property downstream because they were allowed to develop willy-nilly the way they wanted to, and it can be disastrous. So even though, and I do agree with your private property for private uses type comment, there can be instances where there should be some limitation on that. Next thing I want to say is I think we ought to be considering some form of some sort of zoning to protect the areas where there's large tracts of land, like your 240-acre farm, to keep that area in that type of arrangement, but where people that I'm aware of who have very expensive homes outside the city limits, but on the lake and across the street from the lake even, where they should be able to be protected with some sort of residential zoning, so somebody doesn't put a gasoline station on a corner where right next door to their $500,000
I'll tell you
home.
what I'd like to see.
I think we ought to look at that.
I think we need a public hearing. Because I've heard a lot of people around the lake area. Now, Jimmy's not far out of Jimmy, but close to it, that want some type. They mentioned zoning. I haven't mentioned, it's a dirty word to me, and I don't like it. But I think that you as JPs need to listen to what your constituents are saying in your area. Because I think in some areas they want it, in some areas they don't.
I think what you have is in the more congested area, especially right around the lake, it's a much more urbanized area than that outside. And the further in to the city limits you get, the more urbanized it is and the more protections people are looking for. Whereas when you start getting out into the country, people go that far out for a purpose.
In fact, even on the lake, you'll find some areas where the housing density is greater than it is in the middle of town.
Yes.
Because there are huge condo projects sitting there right next to each other where you may have 100 units.
So we may want to consider something like lake zoning or something to that effect.
If you look at this gold line around here, this is the 2000 census population from the urban area that the state came up with. It's all in the striped gold stuff. This is where all the growth's been. This is where all the complaints that I get for some sort of zoning. Don't run my housing value type deal.
Of course, one of the things that happens, and it's one of the reasons I ran for Quorum. I went to a city as Hot Springs or Leadership Hot Springs. And one of the biggest complaints a number of people brought, and they were transplants from the Dallas metro area, said, I am so tired of driving out through the country and looking at these old mobile homes and these junk cars and this, driving to my nice new home I built. And I have one simple statement for that, and I'm opposed to zoning. Okay? Who was there first, folks? And you're developing an area very nice, but you're the one that's encroached. It's kind of like wildlife. Which way is it moving, folks?
I agree with that 100%, but I think the thing is, everything, if you do anything like that, it would be, it's property value.
That's why zoning codes have grandfather clauses.
The grandfathers, and they ain't gonna lose it. But over time,
We have a motion on the floor. Second. Is there any committee member that has another comment to make? If
the minutes right so she can write this down and
Where
we'll
you
go.
go, raise your hand.
Where you go.
That was you seconded, right?
Well,
Marilyn.
Marilyn
I
seconded.
knew it was Marilyn. If you all got those microphones on.
would you repeat the motion?
I want to make sure we're headed in the right direction here.
What I wrote down was that Mary recommended that you move forward, that the committee recommends you move forward pending attorney review. And that's what it got.
That's not realistic.
Laura?
Yeah, I would offer one comment. I don't have any objection to moving forward, but I really believe that your idea about public hearings is excellent. And the second thing is, we need a lot more information. I mean, I really don't feel comfortable with what the makeup of this planning commission might be, because I don't have a lot of faith in those guys. I've worked with them several times, and I gotta tell you, it's a wasted effort. I'd just rather have staff look at it. But we need a lot more information.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the memorandum of understanding is simply an agreement between the board of directors and the Quorum court that we will move forward to answer all those questions.
This is the direction we're going, we understand that.
The board has to approve this, and the board has to approve it,
So that they won't
everybody
spend any
says,
more
yes, we
time.
buy the program.
We're still in draft stage, so.
I've represented people before who have gone to the planning commission of the city of Hot Springs. Planning commission of the city of Hot Springs, in my opinion, made a bad decision. I have appealed that decision to the administrative appeal process to the city board, and in most cases, they have rejected the findings of the planning commission and overruled them. We are going to be the final arbiters, or the city board will, depending on where the property is located. So even if we had a lousy planning commission, which I faced for a long period of time, until they redid it several years ago, you still go beyond that and get the job done right at the level where it all be decided, either the Quorum court for stuff in the county or the city board in the city. So you've got a way to solve the problem, even if you get a lousy planning commission.
We do know that the planning commission, the only function of the planning commission that exists today in the city of Hot Springs is to judge whether it meets the laws of the state of Arkansas and the county and the city or not. And until they politicized it with a number of people that are no longer on that group by making recommendations and writing opinions thinking they were the Supreme Court, that they were only supposed to say yay or nay, and then when it fell in Kathy Selman and group, they made the decisions and moved it to the board.
I'd like to proceed because we have another committee meeting starting at 6 o'clock. I'm going to ask all the committee members in favor of proceeding with the motion. Raise their hand. Those against? How many? Unanimous in favor? That was the only subject for the Public Health, Welfare, and Safety meeting. I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
I guess you'll count on me for